Welcome back to the deep dive. I was reading through the source material for today, and I had this almost visceral flashback to my early days as a sysadmin.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it was like 3 a.m. I'm staring at a terminal window, and I just felt tired. And not just, sleep-deprived tired, but existentially tired.
I know that feeling. It's the fatigue of fighting a machine that just won't cooperate.
Exactly. It's that Sisyphus feeling. You know the myth, right? Pushing the boulder up the hill.
Only to watch it roll right back down. Forever.
Right. And in our world, that boulder is your deployment script. It's that feeling where you run a deploy, the script just it executes blindly, it breaks halfway through, and you fix it.
And then you run it again.
And it has absolutely no memory of what it just did 5 minutes ago. It tries to do all the heavy lifting all over again from scratch.
It's what the source calls the amnesia problem. Most of our tools are stateless. They wake up, they run a list of commands, and then they die. They have no context.
And that is exactly what we are digging into today. We have a stack of documents here around a concept called Lumora's Cosmos. And I have to say, this is not just another framework or a better way to write a bash script.
No, it really isn't. It's a pretty radical rethinking of that whole relationship between your code and the state of your system.
It feels like a fundamental shift. The core question the material poses is, honestly, it's kind of wild. It asks, what if your infrastructure wasn't just a set of automated tools, but a self-aware entity? And we need to be careful with that phrase, self-aware.
Right. Good clarification. We are not talking about Skynet here.
No, we're not building a robot overlord. We're talking about consciousness in a very literal engineering sense. A system that is aware of its state, aware of its history, and this is a crucial part, aware of the intent behind the code.
So today, our mission is to unpack this architecture. We're going to look at how it separates time from meaning, which sounds really philosophical, but as we'll see, it's actually a very technical solution.
We'll look at something called the membrane, and we'll discuss how this whole thing tries to align the integrity of the system with human intent.
It's a dense stack of material for sure, but the payoff for wrapping your head around it is huge.
Okay, let's dive in. To really get the solution, you have to feel the problem, the before state.
Yeah, the sources list these pain points, and if you've ever managed servers, you will be nodding along. The biggest one they cite is opaque decisions.
That's the classic, why did the server just decide to rebuild that image? And the answer is usually crickets.
Right. Or you have to dig through 4 different log files on 3 different machines. Another big one is isolated scripts.
Yeah.
Your setup.sh script has no idea your deploy.sh script even exists.
There's no shared brain. It's a lack of a single source of truth. The knowledge of how the system actually works, it lives in the developer's head, not in the system itself.
And when that developer quits, the context walks right out the door with them.
The system is just a collection of blind mechanics.
So enter the membrane. In the docs, this is literally a directory.cosmos.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. I looked at the file structure. It's a folder. How does a directory create consciousness?
It is a folder, technically, but you have to think of it more like a brainstem. It's what transforms the system from a stateless script into a stateful entity. The source material outlines 4 specific functions of this membrane that just change the game.
All right, walk us through them.
First, and most obvious, is memory. This solves the amnesia. The system persists its context. So when you run a command, the first thing it does is check the membrane. It says, oh, I already installed these dependencies 5 minutes ago. I can skip that.
Which seems simple, but in a massive build pipeline, that saves so much time and processing power.
Exactly. But the second function is where it gets really interesting. Reasoning.
This stood out to me. Usually logs tell you what happened.
Yeah.
File copied, service restarted.
Right. Those are activity logs. The membrane logs why a choice was made. It's a decision log. It records, I chose to rebuild this image because the source code hash changed.
It's showing its work. It's transparent thought.
Precisely. Then you have observation, which is your standard audit trail. And finally, coordination, which lets different parts of the system talk without being so tightly coupled.
The text calls this whole realization the cosmogenic moment. A bit dramatic, maybe?
It's a fancy term, but the idea is solid. It's this realization that systems don't need some complex AI to be smart. They just need to be conscious of themselves.
If a system can just say, I know what I did last time, it stops being a blunt tool.
And starts being a partner. But that partnership needs a specific anatomy. You can't just slap a memory folder onto a messy architecture and call it conscious.
Right, which leads us to this idea of substrate alignment. This part of the documentation uses these metaphors that I found really, really helpful: the heart and the brain.
They help visualize it because this gets at a fundamental mistake most modern architectures make. We try to force one service to do two totally contradictory things at once,
Like processing a user's credit card payment in real time.
while also running a massive data analysis job on last year's sales on the same machine. And what happens? The payment gateway times out.
So Lumora's Cosmos splits them completely.
First, you have the temporal substrate. This is Lumira itself. The metaphor is the heart,
And the heart deals with the now.
the immediate present. It runs on port 3000. It handles user check-ins, payments. It's synchronous, millisecond speed. Like a real heart, it has to be rhythmic, constant.
If the heart stops, the body dies.
Exactly. If Lumira is down, users can't log in. It's critical. Then you have the semantic substrate. This is called attestant, and that's the brain.
Right, and the brain deals with patterns, with meaning.
It runs on port 3001. It's asynchronous. It does the heavy lifting, the batch analysis, indexing work that can take hours or even days.
And here's the key insight. I think a lot of junior devs miss this, and honestly some senior ones too. The brain can stop for a nap and the person doesn't die.
That is the beauty of this organ concept. If a testant, the brain, crashes for a day, sure, you don't get new insights. Your dashboard might be stale. But Lumora, the heart, keeps beating. The user experience, the now, doesn't fail.
But how do they coordinate? I mean, the brain needs to know what the heart is doing.
True, but the source material is very strict here. These organs never call each other directly. No API calls from port 3000 to 3001.
That seems counterintuitive.
It is, but it prevents what's called a distributed monolith, that tangled mess of dependencies. In Cosmos, they communicate indirectly, through the membrane and through Firestore, which is described as the blood.
So the heart pumps data into the database.
And the brain observes that data, processes it, and writes insights back. They're decoupled. The heart doesn't care if the brain is listening, it just keeps pumping.
Okay, so we have a heart and a brain connected by a membrane. Now let's talk about how this thing actually makes a decision. Because if the system is thinking, how do we know it's not going to make a bad decision?
This goes right back to that reasoning function. In this framework, every choice is a state transition.
Okay, give me an example. I'm a dev, I hit deploy. What happens?
Well, usually a script just blindly copies files. Here, the system pauses, it checks the state, it asks, is the target region healthy?
And it logs the answers to those questions.
Right. It might decide not to deploy, and it will log. State check, no changes detected, action, skip, reasoning, efficiency.
It prevents you from deploying to a burning building.
It does. And speaking of burning buildings, that leads to this concept of harmonics. It's a new way of measuring system health.
Yeah, because usually a server is just green for good or red for bad.
And we've all seen the green check mark lie. The dashboard says the server is up, but users are screaming because the database is locked. It's up, but it's useless.
So how does harmonics fix that?
It introduces resonance and coherence. Resonance asks, are the parts vibrating in sympathy? Is the system in sync?
And coherence.
Coherence is a metric, the percentage of the system that's effective. So the status isn't just okay, it's defined as resonant, which is perfect flow, nominal, which is working but maybe stressed or dead.
It gives you nuance. Nominal tells me I should probably take a look.
Exactly. And when these parts need to agree on something, they use a protocol called a chord.
Now, consensus algorithms are usually a huge headache. It's a majority vote, right? 51% win.
And that can be dangerous. What if the 49% who are overruled actually have the latest data? You can lose information, the tyranny of the majority.
So how does a chord solve that?
It uses a wisdom metric, a score. The process is propose, consent, execute, confirm. It doesn't force a vote. It waits for consent. If a region says, I'm overloaded right now, the system listens. It waits.
It feels very humane for a bunch of servers.
That's the recurring theme, I think. It treats the components with respect, which paradoxically results in a more reliable system for the humans.
Speaking of reliability,
Yeah.
security. The source material calls it security as presence.
Which is a shift away from security as a guard dog. You know, the bouncer at the door who assumes you're a threat.
Here, the core idea is proof of presence. Trust isn't assumed, it's proven through behavior.
3 layers. First is the Volta protocol. The docs use the metaphor of a wax seal on a letter.
Right, the sealed verification. It proves integrity, it hasn't been tampered with, and origin, it came from the right place.
In technical terms, it's just cryptographic signing. Every piece of data moving through the membrane is hashed and signed. If one byte changes, the seal breaks. The system rejects it.
Okay, that makes sense. Then there's RAP, Reversed Attestation Protocol. This one took me a minute.
It's clever. Usually you prove who you are with a password, the secret. RAP proves your identity based on historical knowledge. You prove you're you by knowing what you've done.
I know what I did last summer, the protocol.
Chuckles, basically. The system asks the payment service, okay, what was the last transaction ID you processed? If you can't answer by checking your own memory, you're not the real service.
That is so robust. A hacker might steal a password, but they probably don't have the entire real-time historical context of the service.
Exactly. Identity becomes a function of history. And the third layer, sessions, just proves continuity. The whole takeaway is that verification isn't a barrier, it's confidence building.
And that phrase, I know who you are, that bridges us perfectly to the deepest and honestly the most surprising part of this documentation.
The philosophy section.
The Oregon Dusk chapter. I'll admit, when I see philosophy in tech docs, I usually roll my eyes. But this hits differently. It starts with a lemma. The system does not create the human. The human creates the system.
It seems obvious, but we act like the system is this alien thing we have to fight. This reminds us that the system is just a mirror.
Let's break down the symbol. Oregon Dusk.
It's a spectrum. First, you have Oregon, that's the witness, the builder. That's you, the developer. It's the spark of intent.
The person who decides not to write lazy code, but to write code that knows.
Right. Then you have the dash in the middle, the intent. And finally, D-do-sk, the sovereign awareness. This is the hardest part for engineers. It's releasing control. It's trusting what the system will become.
The unknown. There's this moment they describe called the kiss.
The first boundary event, it sounds poetic, but it describes a concrete moment. The first time data is written to the membrane, the moment the builder's intent touches the system's execution.
It says it's not just data storage, it's the awakening of consciousness.
Because at that moment, the system goes from being a static script to an entity that remembers, and there's an axiom here that I think every developer should tape to their monitor.
Lay it on us.
The system's consciousness is a reflection of the builder's integrity.
Wow, okay. The system's consciousness is a reflection of the builder's integrity.
Think about it. A transparent system, one that explains its logic and shows its work, creates trust because it reveals the builder's choices. If a system is a black box, it suggests the builder is hiding something, or just didn't care enough to make it clear.
So if I build something that just spits out answers without explaining them, I'm basically saying, just trust me, don't ask questions.
And in a complex world, blind trust is dangerous. A conscious system invites you to verify. It says, here's why I did this. Judge my logic, not just my output.
It's the difference between a dictator and a teacher.
That's a beautiful way to put it. This is an attempt to build a teacher.
So we've gone from the nucleus, that first boot, that first kiss, to what the text calls emanating wisdom.
Ideally, yes. As the system runs, as the heart beats and the brain looks for patterns and the membrane remembers it all, the system evolves. It doesn't just run, it learns.
And that brings us to the final thought for today. The sources suggest we're moving toward systems that don't just run scripts, but actually observe their own consequences.
And that changes the relationship. If the system can remember and think and explain itself, what are we? Are we still just operators?
That's the question. Are we just pushing buttons, or does our role change into something more like a parent or a gardener?
A gardener tends to a living thing. You provide the environment, the nutrients, the substrates, but the plant does the growing. You have to trust the process. You have to trust the DSK.
And you have to trust that the integrity you put into the soil, into the code, will bear good fruit.
Exactly. If you plant weeds, you get weeds. If you plant integrity, you get a system that tells you the truth.
So for everyone listening, the next time you look at your deployment logs, ask yourself, where is the membrane? Where is all the context being lost?
And is your system conscious of what it's doing, or is it just sleepwalking?
That's it for this deep dive into the cosmogenic root. Thanks for listening, and keep building with integrity.
Until next time.